Well, Mira, I'm sitting here in Denver and I'm thinking about my next couple of weeks, and it's going to be really huge. And it got me thinking about how hard it is for many of us to fight this fight against anti-DEI initiatives, anti-LGBTQ initiatives, fighting against white supremacy, deconstructing the system. It gets harder and harder because we as a society were never taught to really think critically outside of our oppressive systems. And while we're in this space and while we are fighting day in and day out and trying to find different ways to deconstruct from oppressive systems, we cannot really have an expectation that anybody's going to really listen. The only thing that we can do is educate and speak on these topics and hopefully open eyes for people who are ready and willing to listen. And this becomes a very interesting conversation because if you are in the space of deconstructing from your own bias, if you are in the space of deconstructing oppressive systems, and the more you become more active and the more that you are in this space, you get to realize the realities of the extensions of white supremacy and how they've trickled down into communities of color. For example, homophobia and transphobia within communities of color like the African American communities and the Latino communities. Last week, I was giving a lecture to several leaders of a university, and the discussion led us to the extension of white supremacy within communities of color. They were having a little bit of a hard time drawing parallels between white supremacy and anti-LGBTQ ideologies. So I was able to frame where we're living in as a society today as the Jim Crow era. As racial segregation was dehumanizing and delegitimizing Black people all across the United States during Jim Crow, all of these anti-DEI initiatives are doing the very same thing to delegitimize and dehumanize the queer existence through law. And even beyond law, there's an overglorification of homophobia and transphobia within hip-hop culture. Not to say anything bad about hip-hop, I've been listening to it my whole life. But the reality is that there is this idea that you can't be gay or trans or have your nails painted or wear a skirt to be considered manly in African American culture or Latino culture. This is one of the major talking points when we dissect what's happening with Diddy. P. Diddy was engaging in homosexual activity with potential stars he wanted to sign. He was secretly recording them, and then he would blackmail them and weaponize their sexuality to say, hey, if you don't do what I say, if you don't sign this contract, I'm going to expose these videos to the world and everybody's going to see you for who you are. And what that does, obviously, it weaponizes their sexuality. It puts it and paints it in this negative light where being homosexual or all types of being a sexual being now becomes demonized. These are white supremacy tactics. To be completely honest, the only way that we're going to be able to dismantle these oppressive systems is when we come together to understand that we're playing a part as an extension of white supremacy, as agents of white supremacy all across the board in so many different ways. Until you all are ready to have the conversation to understand that religion is white supremacy, the patriarchy is white supremacy, any anti-LGBTQ, any anti-women's rights is white supremacy. The Democratic, the Republican, the Independent Party, whatever you choose to decide to be in America through this system is white supremacy. Ultimately, it is white supremacy because there is no prioritization in the deconstruction of white supremacy. When you are able to connect all of the dots and realize what part you play in this system, only then is when you can truly understand the deconstruction of your own mind and the systems that we've been plagued by for generations. This is why these conversations are important.